Nuu. We are live streaming on Spreaker.com, also available later on all major streaming services as well, along with iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Deezer, JO7, and Google Podcast. Sponsored in part by The Den, ENT, because you can find everything you need in The Den. Hope you like the warm-up song of the day. A little bit of funk, a little R&B in there, sensual love music, just simply called Celebrations. Now it's the wedding part of the show with number 3 and a number 4 of my top 10 wedding tips for planning your day. Let's be honest. Figuring out how to put together a wedding guest list that makes everyone happy can get more political than the actual presidency itself. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, making a list that works for you and your partner should be simple. Write down everyone who you want to be with on your wedding day and disregard the rest. Sounds easy, right? Nah, but somehow in practice, things are never quite this straightforward. Fear not, newly engaged listeners, I am here to help. Here's everything you need to know about building your wedding guest list from start to finish, including who to invite and who to say, sorry, you're not invited. How to make a wedding guest list in 7 easy steps. These are my 7 easy steps. First, number 1. Write a list of everyone you even consider inviting. Sometimes they have to go big. Sometimes you have to go big to get smaller. Sit down with your partner and compile a list of every single person who you would invite to your wedding. If money and space were infinite, spreadsheet, pen, and paper, however it makes sense to you most. Start with immediate family and really close friends and work outwards, including colleagues, schoolmates, and distant relatives down to fair weather acquaintances. Their partners, children, the lot, all of them. This is your master list, but now it's time to start trimming it down. And trimming it down. We're going to be trimming down a little bit of background music as well. Number 2, separate out your top tier guests. Call them whatever you want to. The A-list, the non-negotiables, the must-haves, however you shape it. The message is the same. You simply wouldn't get married without these people there. You know who they are. Highlight them somehow and know that no matter how the list goes from here, they stay very firmly on it. No exceptions. Everyone else gets an invite if space and budget allows. And don't be afraid to allocate some, as evening guests only as well. Number 3, work out how many guests you can realistically afford. Deciding on a venue and a guest list go hand in hand. You can't fully figure out the latter if the vision for the former isn't set. Even if you don't have an exact location locked down, you probably know what kind of day you want. Will you be at a big country house, a cozy barn, on the beach, a beautiful venue out in the woods, wherever? How many people can your dream setting feasibly hold? Can your budget stretch to that many? If you're having an intimate ceremony or a destination wedding, maybe the answer to that question is just the A-list, and that's okay. It's your day, your choice. Where possible, start mentioning to those who might think they've gotten an invite that your wedding will be a very small one as early as possible, before their expectations get out of hand. Try not to feel guilty. Remember that every guest is an extra chair, dinner, slice of cake, and favor that you'll probably have to pay for anyway. To soften the blow, you could arrange a more relaxed dinner or a low-key party after the main event so that everyone who wants to celebrate with you gets the chance. If you haven't had enough of wedding planning yet, because, man, it could be crazy. Number 4, consider your parents' input. Traditionally, both sets of parents get a say on who is invited to a wedding, particularly if they're contributing to the wedding fund, which usually happens. It goes without saying that when it comes down to it, it's your decision, not theirs. But to avoid unnecessary friction, it usually makes sense to at least loop mom and dad in early, and certainly before you consider posting any save the dates. The best way to approach the conversation is to be upfront Once you and your partner are in agreement, show the parents the plan, let them air any concerns in a respectful way. It may be that you can resolve them between you, or you've already thought of the same issue but worked it out yourselves. Alternatively, some couples reserve a portion of their guest list for their parents to allocate themselves. They can ask whoever they like as long as you all get on, but it's a set number of seats that works for your venue and budget and no more. Number 5, be fair with family. If 4 of your cousins are coming, the 5th will probably be upset if they're not. And if your partner's great grandma gets a front row seat for the vows, yours might be miffed to have been dropped altogether. It's not obligatory or indeed foolproof, but one effective way to avoid hurt feelings is to ensure that you treat members of your different families in the same way. Even if you're disappointed, they're much more likely to understand an all or nothing approach. Sadly, we haven't had space to invite any of the aunts and uncles than an uncomfortable explanation of how you're closer to one side of the family than the other. Don't do that. Number 6, stagger your invites. Your first draft of the final list probably won't actually be final. Etiquette dictates that you should send your wedding invitations at least 8 weeks in advance, or 10 if your ceremony is taking place out of town and guests will need to travel. When you start posting them and the RSVPs start trickling in, you will probably get a handful of regretful no's. This doesn't mean you've been snubbed. It means life got in the way somehow. And the silver lining is that you now have space to ask the people you would have loved to have included if you had the room the first time around. Consult your original master list and work with your partner to fill these spots. Just be sure to send the next round of invites ASAP, because no one wants to feel like a second thought. Number 7, and the last one. Remember how you feel when you aren't invited to a wedding. This point is mainly to help you maintain a healthy perspective during what can be one of the most stressful times of your life. If you don't get an invite to someone else's wedding, how does it affect you? And for how long? Even if you think you're definitely on the list, you might be a bit let down for a day or two, but you do your best to understand and move on. And it's very likely your potential attendees will do the exact same thing. A wedding is one day, and anyone who truly cares about you will be there for you well after it takes place, whatever you decide. Take a deep breath, step back, and remember, it will all work out in the end. And that is my 7 easy steps to planning your guest list. You are listening to Weddings, Music, and Wine with Nuu, live streaming on Spreaker.com, available later on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Deezer, JioSaven, and Google Podcast. Sponsored in part by the Den, ENT, because you can find everything you need in the Den. Before we jump back into number 4, the top 10 wedding tips of planning, let's get a little international. I love to bring my international music in, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring in a little international music. I love my international, so we're going to get a little sexy right now. Can we get sexy for a bit? But it's a little Latin-themed cocktail hour with a little beautiful, suave Spanish song just called Airoso.
This is DJ Nuu, the most interesting DJ in the world.
Are you ready? This is DJ most interesting DJ in the world.
Yes, it is the most interesting DJ in the world. Welcome back to Weddings, Music, and Wine with Nuu, live streaming right now on Spreaker.com, available on all major streaming services, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Deezer, JioSaven, and Google Podcasts as well. Well, sponsored in part by the Den, ENT, because you can find everything you need in the Den. And I hope you guys like that sultry, sexy time, old school desperado type. A desperado with, Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek. Movie type Spanish theme song called Ayaroso for your cocktail hour. My last wedding tip of the day is my number 4 tip of my top 10, which is your timeline. The wedding day schedule timeline is a whole event from your waking up to the last dance of the evening. First, getting ready. Wake up at least 5 hours before the ceremony because you and your gang will need at least 3 hours to get ready. Rock your